Esiemo, among two other descendants, got a rework. However, the one to shine the most out of the reworks is Esiemo. For the longest time, I would advise people not to waste their resources on this descendant unless they really like him. But now, he's pretty decent. There are better descendants, of course, but he is way better than he was. What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new first descendant video coming at you with a look at the new Esiemo. Now, this isn't a complete build with full modules, but I am able to nuke everything in sight, as you can see in the background footage. But this video will serve as a look at the rework and his kit, along as a template on what you need to use to maximize the builds. So let's start off with his passive. The passive used to drop a bomb when you had lost your shields, but now simply drops a bomb when you get hit, and that's it. Yay. Time bomb, his first skill. You deploy landmines that can stick to enemies or surfaces, and you can detonate it whenever you want. The bombs remain on the field for 16 seconds until they auto detonate. I literally had a stopwatch for this. Unfortunately, you cannot increase the duration with mods, and even though you have 5 bombs, you can overstack them, but they will detonate when the duration does run out, so you're limited by the timer and the cooldown. The second skill, Blast, is pretty much the detonator for your bombs, which affects the first and third skill. Not only is it a trigger, but it increases the skill power depending on how many bombs placed on the field. This does not add skill power to your descendant, but acts as a final multiplier to your explosions. Guided Landmine, the third skill. Surprisingly, it's slightly similar to your first. It has 3 charges instead of 5. It has a larger AoE where it uses that AoE to auto-seek to targets that are within that radius and attaches that bomb to them. The modifier is a lot stronger than the first skill. The unfortunate part that you have to deal with is the randomness of this skill, because it randomly picks targets to attach to. Now, the fourth skill, this was actually a big one, and it was one of his worst skills. I mean, it still is, but not really. It used to animation lock you in place before you could actually start running. It still has the issue where steering this skill is hella annoying and you need like 5,000 DPI or something. However, you do deal explosion damage on contact, and you can prematurely detonate this skill for a larger explosion, so you don't have to wait for the whole thing to finish. And upon ending the skill, you gain a buff called Madness, and this grants you a skill power, firearm attack, and movement speed increase for a set duration that can be modified. However, you also do take more damage as it reduces your defense by 30%. Now, unfortunately, I did not know some of these skills and how they used to function before the rework because I was not expecting an Esiemo rework. However, I will provide you with the link to all the reworks. But now that you get an idea of how his kit works, let's showcase these builds. Welcome on in, guys. We're in the laboratory taking a look at the Esiemo builds that I will be providing for you here today. A little demonstration on what you're going to be expecting. Boom. One shot, everything in sight. Now, the first build is utilizing the Creative Explosion skill module, which affects the fourth skill. Originally, the fourth skill does this. It gives you the Madness buff, which increases your skill power, firearm attack, movement speed, and decreases your defense. It has a massive motion value of 7.4 thousand, so this does a lot of damage. Originally, it has an 80-second cooldown, but of course taken down even further with skill cooldown reduction modules. And it also has a lower range. When we apply the skill module, it turns into Creative Explosion, as you can see. We do lose a bit of damage, but we get increased to our range, and it reduces our base cooldown, and instead of getting that previous buff where it increases our firearm attack and skill power, it decreases our cooldown. So whenever we use the skill, we get that massive 40% skill cooldown reduction. So our cooldown will go down from the modified 20.5 seconds all the way down to 4 seconds. The maximum it can go down to is 4 seconds, but 4.5 seconds is more than enough. It's literally a low cooldown, and this allows us to spam this ability. Now, the one thing you should know about this, it scales off based on the number of bombs you have ready. So have a look. We have 5 on the first, 3 on the second, and it scales off of that. Because what it does, it consumes those bombs and detonates. Unfortunately, it does not detonate the bombs that are already placed on the field. So if you have a look, when we cast this fourth skill, it does consume our bombs. You see, it consumed all 5 bombs there, and the 3 bombs on the third skill. And having a lot of cooldown reduction allows us to return these bombs so we can spam that fourth skill yet again. So if you want to add even more cooldown reduction to affect the other skills so you can do more damage with your fourth, you can do that. It will still do a lot of damage even though you don't have all your bombs ready. Now, because the fourth skill is fusion, we're going to be running a fusion reactor. Do not mind the substats. This was something I put together really quickly. It was just a fodder reactor that I put together for this build. And you can see it still does a lot of damage. We're dealing millions of damage. That will one-shot anything in the open world and even in dungeons. So it's got the fire and fusion skill. Now for the substats, and the only thing that will benefit you even more is just adding more damage. So if you get fire and fusion in the substats, that's better. If you get bonus range with fire or fusion, that's also good. So we can maximize our fourth skill's range. Otherwise, this is it. And of course, for all the builds I'll be showcasing, I will be using the Slayer component set. This is the best component set for Esiemo because it allows us to deal even more damage as it increases our skill power by 26%. So let's have a look at that first build. This build is using the Creative Explosion. As you can see with the green icons, it shows you what it's affecting. Now, the fundamental principle of this build is having a decent amount of cooldown reduction, a lot of range, and our skill power. Now, with the cooldown reduction, I'm running Focus on Fire, Focus on Fusion, and MP Conversion. You don't need Nimble Fingers because you're going to cap out at 4 seconds. However, you can add Nimble Fingers if you want to affect the other two skills to get back your bombs a lot faster. However, right now, I'm running Frugal Mindset for the increase in range. It does give us that skill cost, so it's pretty good, and Skill Expansion. Now, the final range mod can either be Amplification Control or Maximize Range. This is up to you and what you have on your reactor. Now, this does decrease your skill power modifier, but still you're going to be one-shotting enemies regardless. So if you don't have range on your reactor, boom, pop this on there. But if you don't want it to affect your skill power, then yeah, go for Amplification Control. That will be your last range mod here. So range, range, range. The other mod I would suggest is putting in Spear and Shield. This gives you some defense, but a skill power increase of 8%, so that's even more damage. And the final mod is of course going to be Fire Syncytium. This gives you that fire skill power of 10.2% and that critical hit resistance. You don't care about the critical hit resistance, you just want the skill power. So this will be the last mod. So the final mod can be Fire Syncytium, or if you want to decrease your cooldown even further, you can run Nimble Fingers. That will affect the other two skills, but you're going to be capped to 4 seconds, unfortunately. So here's the demonstration. We do that, and we have a look. You can see 4 seconds, it doesn't go any further. So that's why you're going to be running Frugal Mindset for even more range. And finally, MP Collector, so we can get some mana upon kills. And it could be an interesting build to run in dungeons. And you may have noticed I had no defense mod here is because I do have Defense Master on the weapon itself. So when I kill enemies, I get 128% defense. This is nice because it triggers on any kill. It doesn't matter what you kill the enemy with. As long as you have this weapon active and you kill an enemy, you get that defense buff. And yes, it stacks with all the defense that you have. Now, the other build is a mobbing build that utilizes your grenades, and that deals burn damage over time. So this could be something interesting for you to do, especially if you're in a very mob dense environment. Now, what I'm doing here is using the Cluster Bomb skill module. Now, what this skill module does is that it allows you to spawn cluster bombs when you detonate your first and third skill. Now, these additional bomblets don't do as much damage, but they're still interesting to have because it's just some additional damage that tracks to any nearby targets. So if there's an enemy that's still alive after your barrage, then they're going to take some additional damage and some damage over time. The unfortunate part, it only gives you 1 instance of burn over time. The downside is that burn damage over time isn't that great, and the cluster bombs are quite random. So if there's no enemies, you're going to lose out on damage, but still this is a very useful skill module for mob dense environment. All I did was switch the reactor, of course with the mounting. Over here we got the Thunder Cage with fire and tech because we're dealing with the first and third skill, which are all tech. And for the substats, definitely skill cooldown and even more skill power if you want. The build is slightly similar, but slightly different. Instead of Frugal Mindset, I went with Nimble Fingers to decrease that cooldown even further. So now we're down to 2 seconds here. Of course, we get additional cooldown reduction thanks to Focus on Tech and Focus on Fire. Because we're dealing burn damage over time, it's great to have a damage modifier. So similar concept, we still have MP Collector. I'm using an unranked one, but just to show you how to fit it in. The last few mods will will of course be more range. So frugal mindset and amplification control for even more range. The last mod, funny enough, will be more duration. The duration is just here to maintain our madness buff, because we're going to be snapshotting our madness buff so we can get more damage on our abilities. So when we activate the fourth skill, detonate it, we get that madness buff, which increases our skill power. So it goes up to 21,690. Nice. So it's a nice mobbing setup. You're going to get your madness buff, place down your bombs. You see how they track there. And then boom. That one guy survived. But you get the gist of this build. So it's very nice in a mob-dense environment. The explosive evade. I did have this, but I got rid of it because I had no faith in Eskimo. So this is a pretty good one, which affects your passive. So instead of taking damage and dropping a bomb, all you have to do is dodge roll and drop a bomb. So this could also be used in a mobbing scenario, and you can even build crit around this particular build. So now for those who are wondering why build crit when he has 5%, it's because of his bombs. They all have their own instance of damage when they detonate. So one of them is bound to crit, especially if you build crit. So usually if we put emergency measures, skill insight, and skill concentration with front lines, we will get 15% crit rate with a 4.3 critical damage multiplier. Now you stack this on a boss, detonate it, you're definitely going to crit and kill the boss, hopefully. So that is one way of building around that, and you can use the evade skill module if you want for that particular build, as I was advised by my chat earlier today. So that is one interesting way to build Esiemo. But these are the two builds I've been using. They do a lot of damage, and they're actually decently fun to play. And again, Esiemo is not Blair, because Blair is the superior fire descendant. However, Esiemo is definitely better now. Anyway, folks, that has been it from this Esiemo guide. I do hope you've enjoyed and learned something from it. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more First Descendant content, streams, so much more. Do it for a description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace. Bye-bye now.